Hello everyone, and this is a lesson on how to create explosions in Houdini. So I was going to record a lesson on how to render explosions in Houdini using V-Ray or Arnold, and I kind of realized that I've never made a video on how to make an explosion. So I figured I'll do that first and then do the rendering stuff. So I'm going to do two lessons. This one is creating like a very basic explosion, and the next one we'll take a look at the new tools that are available in 18.5, which are like the Pyro burst and the Pyro trail stuff. Okay, now those aren't very complicated, they just make life a little easier because they give you some things. But this one we'll just keep it very basic. So this is the finished result of the explosion. It's not like a great explosion, but it should give you like enough to sort of understand what's going on. And we'll also take a look at the Pyrobake volume, which makes it look a lot better. The viewport also slows down because it sort of calculates a bit more. But what it's doing, which is very nice, is that it is actually generating a shader. Okay, so the nice thing is that at the end of it, if you want, if you're using Mantra for rendering, these settings will directly just translate over to this Pyro shader that is there. If you look at this Pyro shader, it's pretty much just replicating all of that over here. So whatever changes you make here and you get in the viewport is exactly what you'll get in your render. So it makes life, a lot easier. So to get started, okay, what I have is I just have a sphere, and what I'm going to do is we'll start off with a simple Pyro source. We'll just take a look at how to generate fire, okay, and then we'll look at explosions. So it's fairly, what you need to do is you need to come to initialize, and we'll pick up, you can either pick source fuel or source burn. They're going to do the exact same thing because what happens is in the solver, it renames the burn to flame, or you'll rename the fuel to flame, because in the solver it uses the field that it uses is flame. So I think it would make more sense if this was just called source flame, because that's what the solver uses. But yeah, I don't know why it's there, but you can keep it to source fuel. It's going to do the same thing. Okay, so we have, what it'll do is it'll generate two things. It'll generate a fuel and a temperature. It doesn't generate density, but we will generate density later. Okay. Anyways, once you've done this, all you have to do is, let's say if we take a solver. So I'll take a Pyro solver, and what you want to do first thing is you come to sourcing and change the source volume from burn to fuel, because that's what we have. And I missed a step. So what we need to do first of all is rasterize this. So take a volume rasterize attributes, drop it in the middle, and rasterize the fuel and the temperature. So that should give you this. So now if we come to Pyro source, Pyro solver, there you go. So as I said, if it's kept on burn, you'll get nothing. So you have to rename the right one. Okay, so the fuel changes to flame, and then come into solving and come to flames. So you have a flame lifespan. So if I press play, you'll get a really basic flame, and then you can define the lifespan of the flame, like how much you want. Let's make it even lesser. Yeah, there you go. Okay. So it's pretty straightforward. And then if you're getting like banding, we can try to improve like the sub steps. So let's make like max sub steps to 3. It'll make it slower, but you won't get the banding happening then. There you go. See, so that's a little better. And that's pretty much it, right? Like you don't need to do anything beyond that. So if you just want to generate like a simple fire for a torch or something, like this is fine. And then you can do all the usual stuff, like you can come and add disturbance to this. Just make sure that you're affecting a field that is being generated. So like the disturbance default affects like density, but I think it will be better if we affect temperature. I think that will be better. So if I affect temperature, let's make it like 20. Okay, let's do something better. Let's affect flame. Yeah, okay, there you go. Now it's affecting it. I got it up to about 300, but now it's starting to affect it. Okay. And then you can also try shredding, which shredding directly affects flame. So yeah, so this is how you can go about making like really basic fire. Okay, let's get rid of this. I don't want to work with these settings anymore. So we'll make some new settings. So now what I also want to do is I also want to add in density here. So the idea is I want to generate like an explosion, and then after the explosion, I want a little bit of smoke to still remain, and then that smoke dies out. Okay. So we'll generate like a third attribute here, and we'll call it density. And the first thing is I want to animate these. Okay, so I'm going to come to, let's say, around 10, and I'll animate the flame going down from 10 to around 13. Okay, so in 3 frames it disappears. And with the density, I'll start at around 7, and I'll go up to around 20 and make it 0. So you'll basically, you're getting this sort of animating down. Okay. Now, along with these, let's also add some noise to this. So with 18.5, you have these new attribute adjust nodes, which are, which make life a little bit easier. So take an attribute adjust float. You'll need 3 of these because we're going to affect the density, temperature, and flame. So just affect density, keep this to multiply, and set it to noise. So we'll have this, and we'll also turn on animate, and then just do Control C, Control V. We'll take one more, call this temperature, and we'll take a third one, and I'll call this. So this is, we basically have, this will disappear over time. So now let's take a solver again. Let's take a Pyro solver. And first things first, so come in here and change this to fuel, and come to solving and flames. I'll make the lifespan to around 0.5. And what you want to do is, if I play this right now, what you'll get is just that. Now, one more thing is we're not seeing the smoke is because in the volume rasterize, I didn't pick up the density. So just add in density. So what we'll get now is you'll get a little bit of that fire and then the smoke, and then it disappears. So nothing, like, this is really dull. So what you want to do is, first of all, I want the fire to generate more smoke. So just below the flame lifespan, you'll have 3 tabs. You'll have like smoke, temperature, and expansion. Okay. So first thing is I want to emit smoke, and want to emit like keep the emission amount to about 10. So you'll get a fair bit of smoke being generated. And also come into shape, and we lower the dissipation to around 0.2. Okay. So you'll get the smoke remaining for a while. Now let's also do one more thing, which is I want to add a light in my scene so I can see this. So let's just come in here and we'll add a light, and I'll create a distant light, and let's just rotate this. Yeah, and then I'll hide it so I don't see it in the viewport. So there you go. So you have something, really basic. Now, along with this, I can also give it some expansion, which will sort of make it expand. So just say add expansion. This is all in the flames tab. Okay. And we'll get it up to around 3. So what will happen is, along with the fire, you can see it it slightly expands. So let's take it up to 8. Yeah, there you go. If you take it too much, it gets really weird. So you have to find, I think 5 or 6 is generally nice. Yeah. Let's also do one more thing, which is we can come to the simulation tab, or actually no, come to the setup tab. And the first thing you want to do is, in order to control the quality of all of these, we want to connect the voxel size from the solver to the voxel size in the volume rasterize. So we'll do paste relative reference. And right now I'm using keep input, which is in the Pyro source. I'm just using the points from the sphere itself. But if you're going to keep it to surface scatter, then make sure that the particle separation also uses like the same Pyro solver voxel size. But right now I'm going to keep it to keep input. Okay. So let's keep this. And the one thing I want to do is I want to block the base. Okay, so come into treat Y as do closed below. So it will give you like half a sphere, which looks better. Then it looks more like an explosion and not like a ball. So this is fine. All of this is decent. Okay, but now what we want to do is like the really basic and old-fashioned way of doing an explosion is you just animate a sphere expanding. So what you do is you come into this sphere and we're going to animate, this is from about 10 to 13, right? We won't do that much. So let's start with around like really small. We'll do alt click and I'll come to around say 8 and we'll get it up to around 2.5. Okay. So this should give me that, which looks slightly better. But what would be nice is if we can sort of get velocity from this sphere. Okay. So what you want to do is either before the pyro source or after, it doesn't matter because you just have these points available to you. Take a velocity node. So take a point velocity and set this to compute from deformation. And if we check the velocity here, what we should get is, see, you'll get like a velocity being generated from this. So it'll throw out the explosion. Okay. And what you want to do is come into the volume rasterize and pick up velocity as well. So this should give you a slightly better result. You don't have to pick up the source because by default it picks up velocity. Okay. If it's not, just check here, the default is usually there. Yeah, okay. Now, along with this, let's do one thing. Let's lower the expansion flames and yeah, let's bring this down to 3. Okay, see now it's starting to look a little bit better. And what I can do is let's come into the point velocity and we'll also give it some curl noise. Okay, and we'll get the curl noise scale to around 10. So what this will do is, see, you'll get like, the whole thing sort of breaking up, which looks a lot better. There you go. So you have a basic explosion. Okay, so now we can do a few more things with this. So firstly, let's start adding some disturbance and turbulence. So we'll take the disturbance and let's bring this up to around 20. So we can break up this volume. There you go. Okay. And let's lower the dissipation a bit. Let's also get in some turbulence at around 5. So now here's the thing, right? Like if you want this to rise more, then what you want to do is you want to add more temperature. Okay, so the hotter the fire is, the more it will rise. So we can come to the attribute adjust float for temperature. And let's say if I take the max value to 4. So what this will do is you'll see, first of all, the fire looks a lot brighter now, and it's also rising a lot more. And in comparison to that, when it was at like 1, you'll see that it doesn't rise as much. Or if I bring it really low, see, even the fire starts to change color. Like it's a little more reddish, that means it's not as hot. When it's more brighter, like that means it's really hot. So you can use the temperature to sort of control like how much it should be. Another thing we can do is with the sphere, in order to sort of break up the shape, is I can put a mountain sop in the middle. So just take a mountain sop and drop it in the middle. What that is doing is your shape is sort of breaking up like that, but the element size and increase the height. Yeah, so you'll get this. So that should be a little more, if you play this now, see, so you're getting like the shape is a little bit broken up. You get more, interesting results out of it. And you can change the seed value with the mountain to get different results. Like that's also an interesting enough option. Like we can also try to use something else. Let's say if we take a torus instead of a sphere. Yeah, like if I take a torus here with a lot of points, you can try to turn off center noise. Actually, no, don't do that. Yeah, keep center noise. I'll have to let's take the uniform scale from here, do copy parameter and paste it to a reference. Okay, so we'll have this guy expanding. I don't know how this is going to look, but let's just see how that looks. Like different shapes will give you different results. Oh, that looks nice. Yeah, there you go. That looks decent enough. And yeah, increase the temperature a bit so it rises more, and we can lower the dissipation so it like remains a lot longer. We can also increase the emission amount so we get more smoke coming out. There you go. That looks nice. You can also try to keep the flame lifespan a little bit more. Let's keep this to 15. So the fire will sort of stick around a little bit longer. But yeah, that looks nice. Like you can make interesting results out of this. That's pretty much it. Like there isn't a lot more in here. We can try to increase the substeps to see if that makes a difference. It'll probably just make it slower. Let's try to improve the quality. Let's make it like 0.07. Actually, no. I mean, this is just a lesson, so I don't need to go pretty high. If you want, you can try to come to the shape and disturbance, and we can try to increase like the max octaves and increase the roughness a little bit, so you get like the smoke or the density sort of breaks up a bit more. Let's try to take this up to, let's try 50. Yeah, there you go. That breaks up a lot more. Okay, so let's calculate this and then we'll take a look at the Pyrobake. Okay, I think 50 is a bit much. Let's keep it to 25. And let's go back to a sphere. Yeah, that looks good. What the Pyro burst and source and like Pyro trail, I think, what those do is they give you like additional things. If you want to add trails and smaller particles flying out of the smoke, like all of that stuff you can do using like those two tools. Okay, let me just lower the temperature. Okay, and we'll just calculate this and then we'll move on to the Pyrobake. Alright, so this is the finished result that we have. Like, let me just do a close up here. Yeah. So let's take a look at the Pyrobake. Okay, so the Pyrobake does a couple of interesting things. Like it generates a full material. Okay, so here's a suggestion, right? If you render a lot of explosions and stuff, the best renderer you can use is Mantra. Like I haven't seen any other render engine give, as good a result as fast as Mantra and like the Pyro shader that Mantra has. So if you are looking into doing explosions regularly, stick to Mantra. There's nothing better. Okay. If you do a lot of other stuff with volumes, like the way I do, which is I do a lot of weird, colorful, cloud-looking thingies, then Mantra might not be the best. If you want to do a lot of like light bounces inside volumes and stuff, then Mantra is probably going to be very slow. But if you're doing like a lot of explosions and stuff for VFX work, Mantra is probably the best option you have. Okay, so look for Pyrobake volume and I can just drop it in there. And the first thing it does is it sort of like changes the color of the smoke because it's more geared towards making explosions. So you get this. And what you need to do is fairly simple. Like you have secondary fire, which generates like the main fire. And then you have this thing called scatter. So I think it generates like a brand new field called scatter eventually. I think if I turn this on, there you go. I believe it generates a new field called scatter. Okay. Anyway, so we won't work with scatter first. So firstly, we'll work with the secondary fire. But the reason it's not working is because like down here, the secondary fire intensity is looking for something else. It's looking for something called trail temperature and trail temperature. So we're going to change this to flame for intensity and temperature for color volume. Okay, and what this will do is you'll get this thing explode and then it will fade out. Okay, so this will give you like a much better looking fire. We can use the same thing in the fire tab also. That's also fine, but you'll again have to change this to flame. So it dies out. Okay. If it remains on temperature, it just remains on fire like the whole time. It'll just look weird. Okay, so make sure like this is kept to flame. And what you can do here is you can control like the intensity of it. There's a default color ramp which is actually pretty nice, but you can keep it to physical black body, which is also okay. And then you can sort of adjust the temperature scale, and you can adjust the Kelvin. If it's too low, it'll be more reddish, and it'll be high, it'll go more towards blue. You can enable like tone mapping if you want. And what you can also do is you can enable mask. So what mask does is it allows you to sort of, mask out the fire areas. See. But what I've noticed is it works better at scatter level rather than. So keep this to the way it is. It doesn't really matter. This fade out naturally. Okay, but what you want is you want to generate scatter. So what scatter does, it generates like fire inside the smoke. Okay, so what you want to do is the source volume is temperature and the mask volume is density. And you can define like the scale of it. You can define like a central hot core or something like that. Okay. Again, you can set it to physical black body. You can also set it to something new called Planck black body, which I have never used, and it seems to be like much more. It's actually way more intense. But yeah, see, this looks a lot better. Like not in terms of the color or anything, but just fire on the inside, which looks pretty cool. So you mix these two together and you get a much better result. See, so you get like the initial fire, and once that fire starts to die out, you get like fire inside the smoke. Usually I've noticed keeping it to color ramp is actually better. Apparently like that, this basic ramp looks really good. Okay, and what you can also do with this is you can blur out the scatter if you want. So this is like standard, or you can blur it, and depending on like how many steps you want to blur it. You can also like downsample it, all the way down to 8x. 8x slows it down a lot. Okay, so 2x is fine. And you can also like, it's generating a mask. So what we can do is get the mask center to something like 0.05. So it'll like really make it narrow. Let me just turn off the fire for a second so we can just see this. Yeah, see, there you go. And along with this, what you also want to do is take the smoke density and just up it to around 15 or 20. That makes the explosion look fairly dense. But yeah, scatter as a volume looks really cool because you get like this, nice internal fire on the whole thing. It slows down the playback in the viewport, which is what I've noticed. Especially the mask slows it down. Like if you don't do masking, it'll be fast enough. If I turn off enable mask, you'll see that. See, now the speed is fine. Oh, actually it looks nice. Even without the masking, it looks cool. Or maybe I think the scatter field is slowing it down. Something slows it down. I don't know what exactly slows it down, but Yeah, the scatter field is slowing it down because that's like a brand new thing it has to generate. Just the fire doesn't slow it down. The scatter field slows it down. Okay. Because that's a brand new thing it's making inside the Pyrobake. Ooh, that looks nice. Maybe I can like it. Yeah, that's not bad. You can sort of narrow it down like that. Yeah, there you go. That looks cool. Anyways, that's pretty much it. So this is how you can do a fairly basic explosion using Houdini. Okay. So in the next lesson, we'll take a look at the Pyro burst and the Pyro trail. So that will give you an idea of how you can do more complex looking explosions. Because what that does is it just, if you want to do like particles kind of shooting out in multiple directions, which you were earlier, like you would do a pop net and then feed that into Pyro source, this takes care of that. Okay, it makes it, simpler. Yeah, so that's pretty much it.